Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Sunday service. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya Aviravir Maedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Tena Mam Pahi Nityam. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, O Lord, and protect us evermore from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om Vishnur va Tripurantako bhavatu va Brahma Surendrotha va Bhanur va Shashalakshanoth Bhagavan Buddhota Siddhota va Ragadvesha Visharti Moharahita Sattvanukampodyato Yasarvai Sahasamskrito Gunaganais Tasmai Namah Sarvada. The Supreme Reality and its messengers are known by various names in various traditions. But as for me, I offer my worship always to the one going by any name and belonging to any tradition, who is free from attachment and hatred, free from worldliness and delusion, who is filled with compassion towards all living beings, and is possessed of all noble virtues. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, Peace, Peace be unto us all. So this morning is question and answer. So that means the talk is directed by you. So I got several questions over the internet, over email. I didn't expect many questions this time because last Sunday I forgot to announce it. I wasn't aware of the fact last Sunday that this would be the last Sunday in the month for question and answers. And then for Tuesday, we didn't have the class canceled because of an electrical problem. So the only time I verbally announced it was this Thursday at the gospel class. But still, we got several questions. But I think today there will be time to take questions from the audience as well, either the live audience or the YouTube audience, the live stream audience. So those on YouTube who are watching on YouTube who want to ask something can type it in, and we'll see how many questions we can get. So, as I always say, this is my favorite talk because I don't have to do any preparation. You do the preparation, and I just have to respond to the questions. And I could take the easy way out and just say, I don't know. But that would be a very short session. So let me take the easiest and shortest question first. And that is, how do we pronounce Om? Is it Om, Aum, Aum, or what is it? And so there is a lot of confusion over the pronunciation of Om, mostly among non-Indians, of course, because in India you grow up hearing Om. But among those of us who grew up outside of India and who have seen it in writing, then from the writing it's very difficult to tell because sometimes it's spelled O-M, and we think it's Om, and sometimes it's spelled A-U-M, and we think it might be Aum or something like that. In fact, my first acquaintance with Om was with the Moody Blues, whom probably none of you have heard of, but the Moody Blues were a rock band back in the 60s, a 60s rock band. But they were a rock band that had interest in Eastern spirituality, more specifically Hindu spirituality. They were very popular, but they had a song in which they, much of it was chanting Om, but they chanted it Aum, Aum, Aum. And so I started out thinking it was Aum. It was only later that I realized why there's a confusion. And the confusion is there for a good reason, if there can be a good reason for confusion. And that is that the actual spelling is O-M, Om. But in Sanskrit, O, the letter O, the vowel O, is made up of the sounds and U conceptually. Not that you pronounce them separately as U, but Om is considered to be made up of these two sounds. And Om, its symbolism, includes all three sounds, the the U, and the Ma. As Swami Vivekananda explains in his Bhakti Yoga, in a passage, a very important passage that all should read and study and meditate on about the mantra. He says that Om is the most perfect representation of the ultimate reality because we cannot separate idea from word in our present state of consciousness, and for a long time until we rise to a high state of consciousness, we can't separate idea from word. Idea is always enshrined in a word, in some language, which leads to the idea, the Hindu idea, which Swamiji supported, that as long as there have been human beings, there has been language, because it's impossible to conceive of a pure beginning of language. Because you have to have language, at least at the human level, you have to have language to think, other than thinking in pure pictures. But as soon as we think in terms of idea, we have to have language. And so how would you begin the process without having language to begin with? And so even some linguists like Noam Chomsky and others have posited that language must, they take an evolutionary view of language, of course, the modern scientific view. They say that language must have started developing in lower animals so that it was well formed in the structure of the brain of humans by the time humans evolved. It's because of that problem, that how can you have a beginning to thought, a beginning to language? So Swamiji says that Om is the best representation of the absolute. Why? Because all thoughts are associated with words, and Om is the most undifferentiated of words, which can be seen as the source of all, the generalized nature of all words. To speak, the most undifferentiated sound we make is when we open the mouth and just say And that's why speakers like myself, when we can't think of what we want to say next, we say because you open your mouth and you want to say something, but you can't think of the words you want to say, so like that. So it's the most undifferentiated sound, and that's why Sri Krishna says in the Gita, Aksharanam akarosmi. Among letters, I am the letter the undifferentiated. So language starts in the back of the throat, and U represents the moving forward, the forward from here to here. And Ma is the last sound you can make. Unless somebody has a second set of lips out here somewhere, but for most of us, this is the last sound we can make, is So Om. So in the symbolism of Om, the construction of plus U is important. And if you think of it, why did the Sanskrit grammarians say that O is made up of and U? Well, for one thing, because of what happens in what's called euphonic combination, sandhi, when two sounds come together in Sanskrit, and U join to make O. But it's also because O, if you think about it, it starts with O. And that's why O is considered, in some languages like Spanish and Italian, O is a pure vowel. It's just O. But in English and in Sanskrit, it's considered to be a diphthong. That means that during the pronunciation of the vowel, the position of the mouth changes. So, Om. So all of that is explanation to say that, first of all, the correct spelling is O-M, A-U-M, just to emphasize that it's made up of three different sounds. But the three different sounds are important because of the symbolism. Another symbolism that's dealt with in the Mandukya Upanishad is that A represents the waking state, U represents the dream state, and M represents the deep sleep state. And the silence after Om is the absolute. And so when you say Om, according to that meditation technique, you think Om, Om, Om. You think you're going waking, dream, deep sleep, and then the silence beyond. And then there are other symbolic representations of Om as well, and all of them take these three sounds, plus the fourth, which is the silence afterwards. So there's a reason why it's spelled A-U-M as well, just to emphasize that. But the correct spelling is O-M. Let me also say that according to some, now I've heard some of our swamis say that it's just Om, just Om. But I've heard some yogins outside of our order as well as inside who say that no, the proper pronunciation is you should think of it starting, the sound starting way down here and coming up and ending here. So when you either say it or you meditate on it, you're thinking Om, 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 so that you think of it as this whole the whole range of sound production. So those who say that no, it's just Om, well, that's okay. That's the spelling of it, true. But for meditation on it, and if you're going to meditate on the three elements, which all meditations on Om contain those three sounds, then it's important to get the three sounds. And so again, the meditation on Om usually is Om as Om, 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 like that. So that is Om in brief. Or you may think that's not so brief, Swami, but that's as brief as I can be. So another question. And this is from a talk I did yesterday. Gosh, that seems like it was several years ago already, the way time is happening nowadays. But yesterday I gave a talk in association with a group under the umbrella of the United Nations, the Society, the United Nations Society for Enlightenment or something like that. They had a program I was asked to speak at, and one of the persons asked the question, and so this questioner asking me the question watched that live streamed and wanted me to restate that question and the answer. And so the question was, what do we do when we are confronted with difficult people? With people who are confrontational, people who are aggressive, people who are very difficult to deal with. How do we learn to deal with them? Probably at least one or two of you have met such people, aggressive, difficult people. And so it's a question that most of us have had to face, how to deal with people who are difficult because they are in the face, or they're aggressive, or they're confrontational. Some people, as Swami Yatishwarananda used to say, some people love confrontation. Some people love to create conflict and confrontation. Even when there is none, they look for a way to create some conflict and confrontation. And so even otherwise, we find that it's a problem that all of us have to face. It may be in the family, maybe in the workplace, it may just be in the grocery store line or something like that, or anywhere in society. So how do we how do we learn to face as spiritual aspirants? Because we're supposed to practice kindness, we're supposed to practice equanimity, and it seems like there are some people who are just made to break equanimity. They're designed to disturb equanimity. And so how do we deal with such people and still maintain our spiritual composure? Let me just tell an anecdote about this in my experience to illustrate to the problem. A devotee couple, an American couple, got in our San Diego center. Both have passed away now. Wonderful people, very good devotees. They got initiation from Swami Swahananda when I was running the San Diego center long ago. This would have been back in the 80s and 1980s. So they got initiation, and this was in the evening before Swami Swahananda gave his evening talk. He would speak in San Diego on Friday evening at 7:30. And so he gave them initiation after Arati, which would be at 6, and then must have been about 6:30, he gave them initiation in the shrine. And they came out and they were so inspired. They felt so uplifted by the initiation and they were so happy and everything. So then they came and were sitting quietly enjoying the afterglow of the initiation. And then one of our other devotees, who was very chatty, came in and sat right in front of them, right in front of them and facing Swami Swahananda, and just started chatting, just to be chatting, just going on chatting. Afterwards, the woman of the couple who had been initiated, she came to me and said, "Swami, I have a question. I have a real problem. After initiation, I was so inspired. And then we were sitting here and everything was so wonderful. I was so just feeling still absorbed in the joy of the initiation. And then suddenly so-and-so comes and sits right in front of us and just starts jabbering all kinds of things that had no significance, no meaning. And I was so irritated. I got so angry. And now I'm angry at myself. Why did I get so angry with her?" And so we've all had to face situations like that where and it seems to especially happen in cases like to this lady, where when we're in a really good mood and somebody comes and disturbs it, and then suddenly we're in a very bad mood because the contrast is so great. So anyway, how do we deal with difficult people? So there's not a single simple answer. I'll say several things about it, both from the answer I gave, and also there was another speaker, and she gave an answer also, which was good, and which is something I often say myself also. So it's not like I'm stealing her ideas. It's something I often say myself. So those two answers together, I'll put together. One of the things I said is that we have to learn not to allow the outer world to disturb us. That Swami Swahananda, and that's of course easy to say, very difficult to do. But Swami Swahananda, he used to say that the yogi, as I've said here before long ago, Swami Swahananda was the original multiple choice Swami. When you would ask him a question, he would say, "Well, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do that, or you could do that." And with every question, you would get various answers. And so once someone had asked him something, and so he said, "Well, the Jnani's approach is this, and the Karma Yogi's approach is this, the Bhakti Yogi's approach is that. And if you're a Raja Yogi, you just make the determination, I'm not going to allow anything in the external world to disturb me." So this, you can't make that determination in the moment when somebody's disturbing you. You have to make this determination in calm moments, that I'm going to try to keep my equipoise at all times. I'm going to try to keep my mind in a state of equanimity, no matter what happens in the outer world. And so that, of course, at first, as soon as we make the decision, then something comes up and it disturbs our equanimity. But with practice, we find that just realizing that I gain nothing by getting disturbed by things outside. I gain a power over my mind and my power of, or my reaction to things. I've long ago here in Houston, I gave this example of one of our Swamis, Swami Bhadrananda. He was an Englishman, and he had he grew up in a coal miner's family, very poor. And when he was 13, he had to leave school. He only was educated to the age of 13, maybe the 7th or 8th grade. He had to leave school to work in the coal mines to help support the family. And the coal mine work, of course, was horrible. And so he ran away and joined the British military, lying about his age. And so in his mid-teens, he joined the British Army, was sent to China. And in China, he was there for 2 or 3 years and was present when the Japanese first invaded Manchuria. And so he was one of the first casualties of the war. He was taken as a prisoner of war, put on the firing line with all of his buddies and ready to be shot. And then one of the Japanese soldiers saw on his armband a red cross because he'd been trained as a medic. And so the soldier asked him through an interpreter, "Are you a medic?" And he said, "Yes." And so they pulled him out of the line and shot everybody else. So he had quite a dramatic life. And he spent the whole of World War II, longer than America was in World War II, because again, this was long before Pearl Harbor. He spent the whole of World War II in a Japanese prison camp. And as a result, he hated rice. Because that was about the only thing they had to eat. But he survived. He survived and eventually found his way to Vedanta, became a Swami, fine Swami Bhadrananda. But I tell all of this because he had seen everything. And he had seen everything, been in everything, all kinds of disasters and things. And so nothing fazed him. And so one day at Trabuco, one of the monks at that time was cutting the grass on the hillside behind the monastery. It's quite a steep hill. So he shouldn't have been taking a riding mower on that hill anyway. It was very dangerous, but he did. And the mower, of course, did what might have been predicted. The mower turned over, the riding mower, and it rolled down the hill with him on the mower. And so he's at the bottom of this long hill with the mower on top of him, lying there with broken ribs and cuts and all kinds of things and in great pain. And so everybody, the other monks who saw it, they were all in a fluster saying, "Oh my God, what are we going to do about Rollo? He's lying down there, he's injured. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" Everybody running around. And so they went and called Swami Bhadrananda because they knew he had been a medic. And so Swami Bhadrananda comes and calmly looks at the situation and says, "Okay, we'll call 911, do this, do that, do the other thing. Okay, I've got to go out now, so let's go." He wasn't fazed at all. And that is, who was handling the situation better? Those who were extremely upset and running around, "Oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? Do we take the motor off of him, or are we going to hurt him worse that way? Or do we try to pick him up? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do?" Or Swami Bhadrananda, who came and just calmly looked and saw the situation. "Okay, this is this, that's that. This is what's happened. Okay, you do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That, of course, was the right approach, the one who had the calm mind. So one thing is to make a determination that I'm not going to let things outside disturb me. Let me tell you one other anecdote, and this was from a trucker, Joe, in North Carolina that I knew. He used to tell me that when I was working as a trucker, I made a determination that I was not going to allow anyone to cause me to have a bad day. And I worked as a trucker for 50 years, and I never allowed anyone to give me a bad day. I would go into a delivery place or into a terminal or something, and somebody would be nasty. They would try to get me upset because they were upset, and they, as many people feel, the best way to get over my upset is to make somebody else upset, and then I'll feel in control of the situation because now they're upset, and I feel superior or whatever. So people would try to make me upset. And I would just respond and say, "Well, have a good day, take my papers and leave." But I had that determination, I'm not going to allow anyone to give me a bad day. So that sounds too easy. But it's not. It's not. We can do that if we make a firm determination and keep that in the mind, that I'm not going. How do we back that up? How do we back up that determination? I'm not going to allow somebody to give me a bad day. One way we back it up is by, again, understanding from that first example I gave of Swami Bhadrananda, that I don't gain anything by getting upset. In fact, the best way to, not that this should be your thought of punishing the person, but a person who's trying to make you upset, the best punishment for them is to not get upset. Because they're trying to make you upset. They want you to be upset. And so the best punishment is not to be upset. So again, you shouldn't think of, well, I'm going to get back at them by not getting upset. Oh no, then you're already upset. But the idea is that you don't help anything by getting upset. The best thing you can do is to stay under control. So let me say several other things coming from different angles, because this is a big problem all of us have to face, and there are different aspects to it. Another part of it is that when the situation allows, just walk away from it. You can just think, I don't need this. I'll just take myself out of the situation. Let me just get out. So when it's a situation that you can get out of, just walk away. Just walk away. We feel that, no, I have to respond. I've got to tell that so-and-so. I've got to respond. Well, no, just walk away. Just leave it alone. There's situations where you can't do that. If it's in the family, if it's in the office, at the workplace, where you can't just get up and say, well, I've had enough of this, then you don't have a job. And you can come to another job and you've got the same situation. So it's places where you can't just walk away. Then we have to find creative ways to handle the situation. One thing is that a person, as we develop spiritually, we begin to develop a sense of inner dignity. That comes, what is dignity? Dignity is a sense of inner balance, a sense of self-composure. Of course, in finishing schools and such places, they, for the rich, they teach a formal sort of composure and dignity, which is just a mask. It's just a way of behaving, even though you don't feel it inside. You behave as if you're dignified. You hold your head like this, and you hold your body like that, and you speak like this, and you do. So it's just learning mannerisms to pretend that you're dignified, to assume a air of upper class. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a real sense of dignity that comes from an inner composure. I always remember, it almost brings tears to my eyes. I remember this teacher I had in Sweden. He was from Latvia, or no, he was from Lithuania. Not too much difference between the two, even their languages are connected, but from Lithuania. He had come from a noble family, and he only had one leg because when he was 12 years old, he was riding through the forest on a horse. He fell, broke his leg, and they, in those days, because of the nature of the break, they amputated it. But he was a man of such dignity. I was struck with it. At that time, I had not seen a man like that. And I still don't know, because I never got to know him. Though I had him for a year, he was my math teacher. But a man of such dignity that he made a very deep and profound impression on me. Just this sense of, there was a sense of self-composure, a sense of quiet, a sense of self-confidence, but nothing aggressive. Nothing aggressive at all. It was a real deep sort of dignity that he had. And so that, seeing that was a lifelong influence on me, for which I've always been very grateful. So learning a sense of dignity, and as we grow spiritually, a sense of dignity comes to us. A sense of inner dignity, which comes again with self-composure, with some degree of tranquility of mind, some control over the senses, control over our unconscious urges and so forth. And that gives us a sense that doesn't allow people easily to abuse us. And so that is developing something inside which gives us a composure which affects other people. And so only the crudest sort of people succeed in abusing us because they're not sensitive to that. But if we develop that inner composure, we find that the problem of people abusing us becomes much less. I used to have the constant problem from the time I was a child till middle age, early middle age at least, that I was always a good listener. And people who loved to talk and who couldn't stop talking thought that because I was a good listener that I was a good target. And so I was always getting people who couldn't stop talking coming and just talking to me incessantly, and I didn't know how to protect myself. So it was a real problem. People would waste hours of my time just coming and talking about nothing just because they couldn't stop talking. And they thought, well, he's a good listener, so I'll go talk to him. And they wouldn't stop. So I had to learn how to protect myself from that. It took years to learn how to protect myself, just because, again, as a spiritual aspirant, I was trying to be a good and nice person. And so it was hard to learn how to be a good and nice person, and then tell somebody who couldn't stop talking, okay, it's time to stop, or leave me alone, or I don't have time for this. I had to learn ways to do it. But one thing that helped was, again, developing a sense of inner composure, which made it easier that began to affect other people in a way. And so again, part of it is developing our inner qualities of composure and tranquility. I heard about Swami Satprakashananda, who founded the center in St. Louis. I met him several times, but this was a story I heard about him. That there was a devotee who used to come to the St. Louis Center, and Swami Satprakashananda, after his lectures, he would go to the library in the center and sit at a table, and those who wanted would come into the library and sit around him and ask him questions and so forth. And so there's one devotee who was a compulsive talker. He would just start talking, and he'd just jabbering on and on and on and on and on. And so they said, Swami Satprakashananda, that his way of handling this man was he would just sit there, and the man would start talking, and Swami would listen to a little bit in case he had an actual question or something, and the man would go on, and Swami would just become indrawn, and the man would soon realize the Swami's not even there. And so he'd run out of steam, and he'd stop talking, and that was Swami Satprakashananda's way. He didn't have to say anything. He just withdrew his mind, and it was so evident that the man got the idea. So another thing, something that I told in the lecture yesterday, or not really a lecture, the talk, half-an-hour talk yesterday, and that is looking at it again from a different direction. There was a story I heard from a Buddhist monk. He told about a lake, I think it was in Thailand, that was next to their monastery. And they would go out in a boat on the lake to practice their meditation. And they'd sit in the boat, once they're out in this big lake, and a boat out in the midst of it, where everything was quiet, everything was serene, and then the still water would remind you of the still mind that you're seeking in meditation. So they'd sit there at meditation, close their eyes, and meditate. And there was a lake that was just used by the monks, and maybe once in a while there'd be a village fisherman or somebody that would come through, but everybody knew that this was the monk's place to meditate. So one day he was meditating there in the early morning, sitting quietly, his eyes closed in his boat, and suddenly he feels somebody's boat ram into his. And he thought, oh, somebody's careless. They shouldn't be doing that. And he goes back to his meditation, and again, rams again. And he says, what are they doing? And a little bit later, it rams again. And now he's getting really irritated. And so finally, about the fourth time the boat rammed into his boat, he opened his eyes, and he was going to address the person, scold them, and tell them, what in the world are you doing? He opened his eyes and saw that the boat was empty. There was nobody in the boat. And so how can you get angry at an empty boat? We get angry because we think there's somebody in there who's doing this to me and is doing it deliberately. So I'll give the Buddhist explanation of how he generalized this experience, and then I'll give a Vedantic way to do the same. The Buddhist way was he realized there is no self to begin with, the anatmavada. There is no self within anyone. They're just bundles of tendencies. And so all of us are like empty boats. We think that there's a little person inside of people who is intentionally doing things and so forth. That's the way we think about nature. But no, it's just bundles of tendencies which are acting according to their own momentum. And so there's not a self in anyone. And so why should I get upset about anything anyone does? I shouldn't. They're just empty boats. Now, from a Vedantic standpoint, where we take the self as the central reality, but that self is not the little self. The little self, we agree with the Buddhists that the little self is the karta and bhokta, the one who does things and the one who receives experiences. That's just a bundle of tendencies. There's the jivatma, the individual soul, which is pure consciousness. It does nothing. But it's and then that is just a reflection of the infinite self, which is beyond Maya, beyond ignorance, beyond all time, space, and causation. But even as the jivatma, even as the individual self, individualized consciousness, that does nothing. It's this personality which is a complex of tendencies from our past, our karma, which is acting according to the momentum of that karma. So it's just like a boat that is being carried by the wind and the waves of the water and ramming into this monk's boat. So people are just acting out of their own ignorance. And so just realize that everyone is a slave of their own ignorance, unless they are spiritually free. The only really free person is the illuminated person, the person of spiritual awakening. They're the only free person. Everyone else is a slave of past tendencies, of past karma. And so just realize that they're just all of these unmanned boats that are floating in the water, ramming into our boat, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's just the nature of life. So I said I'd bring in something that the other speaker mentioned, and which again is something that I've often said also, and that was a good part of the answer as well, and that is that we should take everything in life as a challenge. So again, let me back up for a moment and say this is coming at it from a different direction. So all of these things I'm saying are true, but they're all coming at the same problem from a different direction. And so we start with whatever makes sense to us, so we take up that, but gradually we find that these other things are parts of the picture as well, and they help us also. So again, this other idea is that everything in life is a challenge. And so take everything as a challenge. A challenge is different from a problem. A challenge is different from a difficulty. Difficulty is something that we don't want. It's something we just have to get over. A challenge is something that we have to face. A challenge is something we have to find a creative way to do this, to handle this. And so we should take everything in life as a challenge. As I've also said here, not for a long time, but I've said it in various talks over the years here, that life can be seen as basically problem solving or challenge solving. That we think always that, well, I've got this problem in front of me, let me try to solve that, and once I solve that, then it's going to be smooth sailing. But as soon as we solve that problem, we see 3 more problems coming around the corner of life towards us. And we solve those and think that, once I get over this, God, I'll be so glad to be done with this, and then I'll be able to relax. And we're done with that, and there are 5 more problems that are coming our way. And so that's the nature of life. We have to accept life as it is and find that life is, as Swami Vivekananda described it, and it's in tune with modern science, this life, or this universe, is disturbed balance. The whole universe is out of balance. That's why everything is struggling, everything is dynamic, because everything is trying to come back to some sort of balance. The planets are trying to get free of the sun and go their own direction. Why should I always be circling around this guy? I want to go somewhere else for a change. So everything is trying to get free, but everything is disturbed balance. So it's the nature of life that everything is challenge. And so that doesn't mean that the goal of life is to be good at facing challenges. No, it means the goal of life is to go beyond the challenges. But until we go beyond the challenges, we have to face them, because they don't stop. Swami Turiyananda said, the person who wants to swim in the ocean and says, well, as soon as the waves stop, then I'll go in. They're never going to get into the ocean. If you want to swim in the ocean, you take the waves and all. And so in this life, the waves of life are always there. They never stop. From birth to death, the waves are there. So we just have to take them. So again, that's not the end of the story according to Vedanta. The end of the story is we go beyond the waves. God and or the self is what is beyond the waves. There's stillness there, but the stillness not of death, but the stillness of infinite bliss, infinite knowledge, infinite awareness, infinite fulfillment that never ends. But here, until we can get there, we have to continue facing problems and challenges. And so with difficult people, we have to learn how to deal with them. So that question took much of the time. Let me go on and to another question. Could I touch more on Vijnana Vedanta? Vijnana. Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about the state of Vijnana. And so this, not because this and the last questions, not because they're less important, but because I took so much time on confronting problems, I'll deal with them more quickly. The word vijnana means special knowledge. Jnana in Sanskrit means knowledge. Vijnana, the V means vishesha, special knowledge. And so that's why in modern Sanskritic Indian languages like Bengali and Hindi, Vijnan means science. But in Sri Ramakrishna, of course, he wasn't speaking of modern science. For him, Vijnana meant state above the ordinary, well, how can you call the state of enlightenment ordinary? But the state of enlightenment as conceived by most people, most jnanis, most followers of the path of knowledge. So the usual idea of the highest state of knowledge is that you attain to the knowledge, aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. You actually experience my identity with infinite reality. Beyond time, beyond space, beyond the universe, I realize that I am the one reality of the universe. Not as a conviction. That's where we start. Conviction is necessary. That's a great thing to have conviction. But I'm not talking about just the conviction, because there's some teachers of Vedanta, some modern teachers, who teach that the only thing to attain is just the conviction, the understanding of the scriptures, I am Brahman, and then you're finished. That's all that there is. No, that's not all that there is. That's the perversion of Advaita, of non-dualistic Vedanta. The knowledge is the knowledge that I am the reality and the actual experience, not the conceptual knowledge, not the conviction, not the understanding, but the actual immediate perception that I am the infinite reality. I see everything as myself, and I see myself as beyond everything. So as the Ashtavakra Samhita says, everything is mine, but nothing is mine, which is similar to Sri Krishna's sayings in the Gita. Everything is mine, but nothing is mine. Everything is mine means I see the whole universe exists within myself, and I am everywhere. I am the reality within everything, within material things, within other living beings. I am the one self of the universe, but nothing is mine because I'm beyond all of that. I'm transcendent to the whole universe. I am the non-dual Brahman itself, beyond time, beyond space, beyond causation, where there is no universe. So that is conceived of as the state of knowledge, the state of jnana, the state of ultimate realization. And the state of vijnana, which Surenji, leave that alone. I already said it at 7. It's at 75, right? Yes, leave it at 75. Okay. So the state of vijnana, as Sri Ramakrishna said, that is the state where he's described it as when you're climbing steps. You're going to the roof of a house. To get to the roof of the house, you leave step by step behind, saying, not this, not this. Okay, this is not the roof, this is not the roof, this is not the roof, until you get to the roof of the house. And then using the analogy of Indian houses, where nowadays most of them are made of cement and brick, cement and lime, etc. So he said that you get to the top of the house and realize that the roof and the steps are made of the same material. So he said, is what happens in vignana. That in the state, to arrive at the state of knowledge, full illumination, you say, not this, not this. The body is not the reality, the mind is not the reality, thoughts are not the reality, this external universe is not the reality. You negate everything until you come to the reality. But once you come to the reality, you realize that everything is that. That was the lesson Totapuri had to learn, Sri Ramakrishna's teacher of non-dual Vedanta. Totapuri had realized nirvikalpa samadhi, and had realized his non-dual nature, that he was Brahman. But when he came back to this plane, he was still in a state of duality. That is, he saw Maya as opposed to Brahman. He saw that this world was the world of ignorance, and Brahman is the world of transcendence, where that is my real nature, and this is all ignorance. So it was through Sri Ramakrishna's teaching that he had to learn that, that this universe also is nothing but Brahman. That doesn't mean that the person in the state of vignana sees the world as we see it, not at all. Sri Ramakrishna didn't see the world that we see, or the world as we see it at all. Yeah, he saw the same, he was looking at the same thing, but he saw it quite differently. He saw it as Brahman. He saw everything as pure consciousness. There was this point in in his doing worship as the priest in the Kali temple, where he began to see that all of the worship vessels, the floor, the walls, everything was the pure consciousness of the Divine Mother. Then who was going to offer what to whom? When everything is the Divine Mother, or in terms of knowledge, when everything is Brahman, who is to offer what to whom? And so he couldn't observe the formalities of formal worship. It fell away from him, as the scriptures say it does. But he used to say that in the state of vignana, one sees that there's nothing but knowledge, nothing but Brahman. Everything is that highest reality. And so the state of vignana is a state of ultimate non-dualism. That is, in Totapuri, there was still a subtle dualism between Brahman and Maya. And so there were instances like when a worker came to take a coal from a burning ember from Totapuri's sacred fire, where he would sit for meditation. He was sitting there with Sri Ramakrishna, and a worker came to take a burning ember to light his chilam, his pipe. And Totapuri got angry with him. What? You're taking from my sacred fire for your chilam? And chased him away. And Sri Ramakrishna said, so why does Brahman get angry with Brahman? Meaning Sri Ramakrishna, who had experienced through the teaching of Totapuri the non-dual state and had realized that all is Brahman, he said, why does Brahman get angry with Brahman? That is, Sri Ramakrishna saw that the person coming to take the ember was Brahman, the ember was Brahman, the fire was Brahman, the Totapuri was Brahman, everything was Brahman. So where was there this ignorance of Totapuri that he chased the man away? And so that was the state of vignana. So vignana, let me say one other thing that's important about vignana, and having tried to explain what it means. Of course, attaining it is a very different thing, but that's what it means. My conviction is that Swami Vivekananda, he taught vignana as the starting point of spiritual life. Not the realization of vignana, but the truth of vignana was the starting point of spiritual life. In the case of every teacher, they teach the ideal and a way to get to the ideal. But someone like Jesus teaches that there is the Father in heaven, love the Father in heaven and everything. The people he's teaching, they don't see the Father in heaven. He's teaching them an ideal which is beyond their experience at present. But by teaching them that there is the Father in heaven, you can love the Father in heaven, you can realize the Father in heaven, and so forth. He's teaching an ideal and the path to get there. And Swami Vivekananda taught vignana in that sense, that is the ideal, but you start by aiming for that. And so when I was working on the complete works of Swamiji, I found a strange thing, that if you do a search on all of Swamiji's recorded works, on all of his works, you do a search for vignana, you find only one, and it's maybe two places where the word vignana is found in all of Swami Vivekananda's recorded teachings. And he's using the word in the sense of science, not in the sense that Sri Ramakrishna taught. And Sri Ramakrishna taught that his highest teaching was vignana. And yet Swamiji doesn't talk about it. So that would be a mystery. But my conviction is that that's all Swamiji ever talked about, because he was always teaching people, worship the visible God. This is all God here. Everything is God. Learn to see the visible God. He said, when you see a mother cat nursing her kittens, bow down and worship. For where there is love, there is God. He said, literally believe this. He said, why do people go and build temples and make images and bow down and worship when the living God is here in front of you? You don't have to. It's like, he said, it's like the fool who digs a well on the bank of the Ganges. The water of the Ganges is there, and yet you're digging a well for water. And so the river of spirituality is here in front of us, and yet we're digging a well to try to find it. And so Swamiji, everything he taught was to see the living, real God here in front of you. See everything as the manifest divinity in front of us. Even material things, that if I could see into the heart of this, I would see nothing but the shining Brahman. So now let me go on to the last two questions. But these also are very good questions. One of them is, if an aspirant neither has initiation nor a mantra, what is the best option for spiritual progress for such a person? So if one has neither initiation nor the mantra which comes through initiation, then how do we, what do we do? Swami Saradeshananda, a disciple of Holy Mother, used to say that for those on the path of knowledge, initiation is not necessary. He didn't say that they shouldn't get it, but he said that that initiation is not necessary on the path of knowledge. And also in the process of initiation and the receiving of a mantra from a qualified teacher, that's a great blessing in life. It's a great blessing in life, but it's not necessary for everyone. Otherwise, it would only be people who had received Hindu initiation who became saints. And you find in all traditions great saints who never had initiation from a teacher. And so initiation can't be seen as essential. It can't be seen as the requisite for attaining to realization. No, it's not. It can be a great help. It can be a great benefit, and it's something which can be very good for us if we want it. But my conviction has always been that initiation should be something which is personal, that a person needs to feel the need for it. In San Diego, there used to be some of the devotees who would go around to others and say, oh, you must get initiation. When people would first show up at the center, oh, you have to get initiation, they would continue to bother people that until you get initiation, then you haven't gotten the real thing. That's what the real thing is. No, that's something which is personal. When one feels the need for it, okay, thank you. When you feel the need for it, then get it. No matter, some people get initiation at the beginning of their spiritual life. Some people get initiation very late in spiritual life. It doesn't matter. And some people don't get it. They are very good devotees we've had who, in our different centers in India and outside, who never got initiation. So that depends on one's felt need. So what do we do? The actual question is, what's the option for such a person who doesn't have a mantra, doesn't receive initiation? Then, as Sri Ramakrishna said, longing is everything. And so longing, that itself is a big thing. How do we get longing? So we start with interest. We start with interest. When we feel the appeal of spiritual life, we have a little interest in it, and we start with that, and we build on it. But through that, everything can come. Through that, everything comes. The main thing in spiritual life is the connection between the soul and reality, whether God or the infinite, the indescribable self. And so you find many saints and songs of many saints that they sing that it's neither by mantra nor by tantra nor by japa nor by karma, etc., that one attains to God. It's by the longing of the heart. And so whatever we do that increases our longing for spirituality, that in the end is what is best. Even if we get initiation, then we want to cultivate longing so that as we do japa, that is associated with longing. So again, I'm not saying that initiation is not a very good thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's a great blessing. It ties one to a tradition in a tangible way. And it's the bearer of grace and blessing. But it's not the only way to come to God. And so the other question is, the other day it was mentioned that a person can talk to God. How does that compare with tantrikas who call spirits through a medium and talk to them? Well, that one is an easy one. I don't need to spend much time on that. A good question, but an easy one because there's a vast difference because of who we're talking to. So in the case of a medium who calls spirits and we talk to them, yes, whether it's in the West where they call up ancestors or dead people and you talk to people who have passed away. Of course, most of those are imitation. They're not real, but there is the real thing. There are mediums who are real who can actually contact people who have passed away. And that we know because of the things that sometimes a good medium says. They actually reveal things that they had no way of knowing unless they actually contacted the person who had passed away. So that's the real thing. But they're talking to an ordinary person who has passed away. Or the tantrikas may talk to gandharvas and yakshas and celestial beings and so forth, but those are not God. Talking to God is quite different because there you're talking to the ultimate reality. You're talking to the ultimate reality who has taken personal aspect, not necessarily form, it can be with form or without form, but a personal aspect. If I'm in a room in the dark and one of you are seated there with me in the dark, we can talk to each other even though we don't see each other's forms. And so the form is not necessary. I just know that you are conscious and you're responding to my words. So it can be formless or with form. But talking to God is talking to the infinite source of all wisdom, the source of all goodness, the source of all blessedness, the reality itself. And so there we are in communication with, talking to, connected to the divine itself. And so that, of course, has a vastly different effect on us from talking to yakshas or gandharvas or dead spirits. So let's see if we have time for a question here, since I asked for questions. Were there commentators like Adi Shankara who clearly elucidated Advaita before the Buddha? I ask this because the Vaishnavas call Advaita as Buddhism is in disguise. Yes. In fact, Madhvacharya, the great dualist commentator, Dvaita Vadin, he said that Shankara was Prachanda Buddha. He was a hidden Buddhist. Shankara was actually a Buddhist. Well, no, Advaita was long before Buddhism. The Upanishads are full of Advaita. I almost said full of Buddhism, not Buddhism. The Upanishads are full of Advaita long before the time of Buddha. In fact, the Buddha was influenced by Hinduism. And yes, later Buddhism and Hinduism grew side by side in India for over 1,000 years. For 1,500 years, they grew side by side, and so it was mutual influence from one to the other. But the greater influence was from Hinduism to Buddhism, even though, yes, Hinduism was influenced by Buddhism. And in answer to the Vaishnava criticism that Vaishnavas often say that Advaita is just Mayavada, and it's the Buddhist, it's just Buddhism in the disguise of Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda said that Vaishnavism was the most influenced by Buddhism. In fact, even the murtis in Jagannath's temple in Puri, historically, those were the images of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. The three ratnas of Buddhism, those were converted into Jagannath in Puri. Swamiji said that the Vaishnava, he wasn't criticizing the Vaishnavas, but he said that the Vaishnava love for all creatures, their emphasis on ahimsa and love for all creatures, compassion, jive doya, etc. That was absorbed from Buddhism, where ahimsa and love for all creatures was emphasized so greatly. And so it's strange that those who criticize Advaita for being just hidden Buddhism, that they were deeply influenced by Buddhism. In fact, some have seen, some I have not seen, some have said that after seeing the image of Badri Narayan in Badrinath in the Himalayas, that the image itself looks more like a Buddha than it looks like a Vishnu. The story is that Shankaracharya in Badrinath, he found the image of Vishnu in the river bed. And the story is that the Buddhists had taken Vishnu out of the temple and thrown it in the riverbed and made it a Buddhist temple. And so Adi Shankara came and found the image at the bottom of the river, brought it out, and established it back in its temple. But equally believable is that the temple was a Buddhist temple, and that the image was converted into a Vishnu image. So I don't have any proof of that. No one has proof of that. Maybe there will be proof one way or the other. It doesn't matter to me. But the idea is that there was influence on Vaishnavism, profound influence on Vaishnavism. In Bengal, the Holy Mother's family, one of their family deity was Dharma. And Dharma is the Buddhist deity that was absorbed into Hinduism. One of the geniuses of Hinduism was the power of absorption. So there's nothing wrong with that, because everything that was absorbed into Hinduism was absorbed in tune with the Hindu cultural ideal, religious ideal. So it's not a mishmash of different influences. It's a tradition which is rich because it was able to absorb so many things. Let's see. It says here, I didn't see the second part, which is written separately, not to rely on Upanishads alone as they are interpreted differently without commentaries. Yes, but it's extremely difficult to get a dualistic interpretation of the Upanishads, where the Katha Upanishad says, Neha nanasti kinchana. There's so many statements in the Upanishads. Yes, the dualistic commentators, as Swamiji said, all of the commentators twisted the texts. Shankara wanted to show that everything in the Upanishads was non-dualistic. The dualistic commentators wanted to show that there was nothing non-dualistic in the Upanishads. But certainly the Upanishads, you can't study the Upanishads themselves before you study the commentaries without seeing that the intent of the primary intent of the Upanishads was non-dualism. Madhvacharya says that we're in the Chandogya Upanishad, where the father teaches his son, Shvetaketu, that Tattvamasi, that actually what he said was Atattvamasi, thou art not that. and and where it says Aham Brahmasmi, actually it means I belong to Brahman, not I am Brahman. The clear statement is Aham Brahma Asmi, I am Brahma. Brahman, but it means I belong to Brahman. That Brahman, I'm dependent on Brahman. And so there are many, many statements in the Upanishads. And so the Upanishads are quite sufficient if one just reads the texts without superimposing the commentaries of Shankara or anyone else. So let's see if I can get through one or two more and then we'll close. It's already past time. Could you speak a little about Adhikari Bheda? I read that different teachings were given to different audiences. This is very confusing in the context of scriptural study, as I am not sure if what I am reading from a text is meant for me. I'd appreciate guidance in appreciating this concept of Adhikari Bheda. So Adhikari Bheda means the difference of fitness according to different people. Some people are fit for one path and some for another. So that's a major problem for all of us in spiritual life. And so one of my teachers, not my guru, but a great teacher of mine, Swami, he used to tell me something that made a great difference to me in the study of the scriptures. He said, whenever you study anything, and especially any spiritual work, always ask, what does this mean for me? What am I to do with this? And so there's some things that I'll find that they're beyond my understanding. And so then I don't know what to do with it, so I have to set it aside for now. There's some things I read that I can conceptually understand, but I don't know how to practice. And so I can see that, well, maybe this is true. I can conceptually conceive of it, but I don't know what to do with it. And so that also, I said, there are other things that I see that, yes, this is true, and I know, and I can figure out what I can do with it. And so one thing is, if we have a teacher who can help us figure out what is right for us, or even if we have a teacher, many of us have to figure out much of it ourselves, because you can't, most of us don't have the opportunity to live with a teacher where every 5 minutes we can ask him, well, I just read this, what about this? And I read this, what about that? So we have to learn to figure it out for ourselves. And that we do by reading and asking, what does this mean to me? And so I've given whole talks on how to find our way through the 4 yogas, because for many of us, we begin to read the 4 yogas, and each one of them, when we read it, we think, well, this is the one I like most. And come to the next one, oh, I like this one. And we read the next one, I like this one, so what do I do? So what we have to do in spiritual life is to find what are those things that whenever I find them in a scriptural text, or a non-scriptural but spiritual text written by a spiritual person, when I find things that appeal to me every time I come across them, that no matter when in what form I come across them, that this really appeals to me, then I know that this is speaking to me. There's something within me which responds to this. And so then I get the idea that this is important to me. I should take this as part of my path. So by trial and error. So with the help of a teacher, if we have that ability to get such help, or by trial and error, by reading and figuring out what things mean to me. So I think that's the last question. Or in the context of what you just said, is moksha to be faced as a challenge? Is moksha, liberation, to be faced as a challenge? Yes, that's the ultimate challenge. Not that it's a problem in the sense of something we have to get over, but as a challenge in the sense that that is the ultimate problem we have to face in life: how to get to moksha, how to realize moksha. Advaita Vedanta says that we are already mukta, we are already free, but we don't know it, and so we have to realize it. We don't feel free, and as long as we don't feel free, effectively we're not free. So though Advaita says that you are already illumined, you're already free, and I'm still sitting here with all of my same problems and same complexes and same confusions and things, then that didn't do me much good. So I still have to face that challenge. So finding moksha is the ultimate challenge. Oh, that's a complicated question, a good question, but a complicated one about population. Majority of population isn't in equanimity state, so wondering how such new jivas came about seemingly with existing karmic tendencies. So yes, that I'll just deal with that briefly and then I'll close. The question is that there's so many living beings, and our population is growing. So many more new living beings coming all of the time, as far as human beings. So where did all of these beings come from? And all of them are lacking in equanimity, except for the few saints. They're lacking in equanimity. So where did they all get karma? And since they seem to be increasing in number, how did that karma come? Where do they get? Where do these new beings get karma? So Vedanta says that there is an uncountable number of jivas. There's not a countable number. We don't use the word infinite, though it is a mathematical infinity, but we don't use infinite because the real infinite is that which is beyond time, space, and causation. But there's no beginning to the existence of a jiva. Why? Because if you were to look into your past and see where did my present tendencies in this life come from, you'd see a previous life. You look at that life and say, well, where did those tendencies come from? You'd find a previous life. If you did that, you would never find a beginning, because the tendencies are, well, there was always something which led to those tendencies. And so Vedanta says there is no beginning to a jiva. There's an end to the jiva. That doesn't make logical sense. It makes a higher sense. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make logical sense because logic is trying to make sense out of this. And this, our experience right now, is based on ignorance, avidya. We can't get away from the fact that we are experiencing everything from a standpoint of ignorance. And within ignorance, there are always going to be unsolvables. Because if it were perfectly logical, it wouldn't be ignorance. If it were perfectly explicable, it wouldn't be ignorance. And so I think of it, this is just an image to think of. Probably all of us here have been, whether growing up in India or in the West, been in a house of mirrors. Like here, when I was a kid, we'd go to the county fair, and there would always be a house of mirrors you could go into. And some mirrors would make you look hugely fat, and some would make you look pencil thin. And then there was always a place where you could see two mirrors facing each other, and you'd see a number of reflections going on and on and on. So I could see myself in the mirror, but then another image of myself in the mirror, another image, all in this one mirror, because it was catching the mirror behind me. And so there was this regress of images. And so as kids, we would all try to find, well, let me see the last person, let me see the last image of me, but you can't see the last. It just disappears into so small and indistinguishable that you can't see it. But there's not an end to it. So this universe is like that. When we are within time, there's this succession of reflections where there's no beginning to them. And so if I try to find the first time I came into existence as an individual being, I lost my identity with Brahman and came into this universe, Vedanta says there's no such thing, because you're asking, when I, who was beyond time, space, and causation, when did I come into time, space, and causation? It's an illogical question. The very question is illogical. It can't be answered. And so when we look into the past, we see that there was always something before any incarnation which caused that incarnation. So it's inexplicable. But all we have to do is there's no use in trying to find our first incarnation. You're not going to. All we have to do is step outside of the house of mirrors and the whole thing disappears. And we see that it never happened to begin with. We're trying to explain something that never happened to begin with. So let me end on that note by one other further explanation. Don't try too hard to understand it in logical terms, because it's not a logical problem. It's a problem that's outside of logic. It's like in the story by Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis. There's a short story, a very famous short story by Franz Kafka, written in the earlier 20th century. It's about a man who wakes up one morning in bed and finds that he's a caterpillar. So he went to sleep at night, his usual identity, he wakes up in bed and he's a caterpillar. And so it's the story of his identity. So we are like people who have awakened in suddenly, not remembering our past identity, but suddenly thinking that I'm a caterpillar. So we go to the doctor, that is, we go to the guru and ask, oh, Guru, how did I become a caterpillar? And the guru says, oh, don't worry about that. Do this. You meditate, take this mantra, meditate on the mantra, do your worship, read the scriptures and things, and that will cure you. And then you will be back to your true self. The problem is we never became, and the guru knows that we never became a caterpillar. But it's the guru's work to give us some medicine so that we come out of this condition. And so if we go to the guru and say again, we wake up and we find ourselves a caterpillar, so we crawl to the guru and say, how was it I became a caterpillar? The guru knows that if I say, you're not a caterpillar, then the person will say, well, you're of no help. I'm going to go find another doctor who recognizes what my condition is. You can't even see the obvious. I'm a caterpillar. And so the guru gives us all sorts of solutions to do in order to wake us up from the dream. When we wake up from the dream, we find there was no problem to begin with. All of those problems about when was my first birth and how did karma start and all of that, those were nonsense problems. They don't make any sense. They're part of the condition of ignorance. As when we step into a house of mirrors and see these infinite reflections, well, where's the last one? You're not going to find it. Step outside of the house of mirrors and you find it was just a play of mirrors. It was nothing but a play of mirrors. So with that, I will stop. Very good questions this time. I'm sorry I didn't take any from the live audience here. We have a number of people here now that we're having live audiences again. Glad to see everybody. And in closing, let me say that I watched an episode of, on YouTube on my cell phone, I watched an episode of Stephen Colbert, the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where he had his first live audience after the pandemic. And he was so excited to have a live audience. And it made the show a lot better also, having a live audience, instead of him just speaking into a microphone and imagining that there are other people on the other side of the camera. And so it's nice to have people back. Good to see all of you. So now for announcements and then a closing chant. On Tuesday, we'll have the Katha Upanishad, unless electricity goes out again like last week, but we're assuming that electricity will stay. It was a fluke the last time that it went out. Nothing with our property. It was the Cinder Point's telephone pole. So Tuesday night at 7:30, we'll have the Katha Upanishad as usual, God willing. Thursday, we'll have the Gospel of Thursday we will not have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class because Swami Sarvapriyananda will be here. And we will be otherwise occupied with him on Thursday morning. So next Thursday, there will be no gospel class. We haven't sent out the notice for July. Simanti will send that out shortly as soon as I give her the information. So Thursday, there will be no gospel class, as you will see in the announcement coming out shortly. And on Sunday, there will be no lecture because it's the 4th of July. But we have a special treat on Saturday. At 11 o'clock, Swami Sarvapriyananda, the Swami Sarvapriyananda, will be here, the YouTube phenomenon. He and Swami Sridharananda, two very different Swamis, but the two of them are our best speakers in the order these days, the very best of our speakers. So he will be here on next Saturday at 11 o'clock. But the seats have already been reserved. We sent out a notice on our mailing list, and within 2 hours, all of the 72 seats were reserved. So there's no more room here. If you didn't get a reservation, you can watch live on YouTube. It will be live streamed, just as this is being live streamed. So as many people as want can watch it on YouTube. Just go to our channel, and you'll see Swami Sarvapriyananda next Saturday. If anybody registered for the talk on Saturday, and they find that either they or people they registered together with themselves, some people registered for like 3 or 4 people, family members or friends or something, which is good. But if either you or people that you registered under your name cannot come, please let me know. You can either go to Eventbrite and cancel your reservation, which someone has already done, and someone has already taken that reservation, or you can let me know. Because we already have a waiting list of people who want to attend. So please don't deny people by not letting us know that you're not coming. If you registered and you can't come, even if it's the morning, Saturday morning, and you find you can't come, please let me know, because there are other people who want to come. So those who did get reservations, congratulations. I didn't say that to make you feel guilty for getting a reservation. Be happy that you got a reservation. And please come. Just things happen, life happens. And so if you can't come, just let me know. The other announcement is, again, Sunday, next Sunday, there'll be no talk because of the 4th of July. And then we're going to take a break in the summer, the second half of July and all of August. Usually we take off just August, but this year I'm going to take off the second half of July for a variety of reasons. Second half of July and all of August, we will be on break. So there'll be no lectures and no classes. So that means if you want to hear lectures and classes, you better come now, or you'll have to wait until September. So those are all the announcements, so I'll give a closing chant. Om madhuvatarayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvirna santoshadhihi madhunaktamutoshasi madhumatparthivagum rajaha madhudyaurastu nah pita madhumando vanaspatir madhumagumastu suryaha madhvirgavo bhavantu naha. Om madhu, om madhu, om madhu. For those who seek the truth, and for all living beings, may the winds blow sweetly. May the rivers flow sweetly. May the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day. Sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May all the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness.